Hello, and it's Rita and Kevin from First Position Performance Development, talking about another one of those very useful to understand metaprograms. And today the topic is on frame of reference and source metaprogram.
And we're going to start with a question, and the question is, how do you know when you've done a good job? So maybe if you want, just pause and pause the video and just write down a few ideas, a few thoughts on that. How do you know that you've done a good job? Okay, so let's explore that idea. And this metaprogram is about, where does that source of evaluation come from? So that's why this question about how do you know you've done a good job is such a good question. Where does that source of evaluation come from? Does that come from within you? In other words, is it internal, or does it come from the external? So, for example, if I was running an internal pattern and I was asked the question, how do I know I've done a good job? I would say something like, well, I just know. You know, I know when it's good, and I know when it's not so good. You know, I'm my own worst critic. I just kind of instinctively get a feel for the quality of it. You know, it's a gut feel thing. I just know, really.
Whereas if I was running an external source frame of reference, I would know I'd done a good job because someone told me, the feedback I got, the results I saw as a result of my actions. So there'd be some external reference that I'd refer to verify that I'd done a good job or not.
And in fact, if Rita is running that external pattern, she might have no idea herself on whether whatever it was that was being evaluated was good or not. Now, a key thing about this, we are presenting the idea that there are these two metaprograms, and we're not saying one is any better than the other. Of course, in this example, for this metaprogram, that's certainly the case. I think what we are saying here is that both have their place and both are useful. Mm-hmm. If you are running your own internal evaluation without taking any notice of what anybody else thinks, clearly that's a recipe for disaster. And the other side of the coin as well is that if you were simply relying on other people to tell you whether it's something you've done is good or not, then that's going to be very unstabling for you, because you're never going to know, and you're going to be listening potentially to the last person that you spoke to and going by what they said. So I think it's very important to have that balance, that you get a sense that whether something is good or not, and you develop that skill, you develop that process, and you also check it outside as well, and you get feedback on things.
Mm-hmm. And it is about it may be first and foremost realizing that there is another way of doing it, because if we are strong at one end or the other, we may think everyone does it like that. And one thing we do know is that that's not the case. So appreciating there is another way of evaluating, and that reference, you can get the reference, is incredibly useful. And with so many things, if you're extremely at one end, there can be advantages and disadvantages, like whichever end. Someone who is internally referenced, they may appear that in one's context, they may feel very arrogant because they're not listening to feedback from anyone else. The other thing that's interesting, it's not always about that brash, confident arrogance. It could be the other side of that coin, where they feel however good they do something, they can never believe in themselves, you know, their own terms of reference, their own sense of self-esteem. It's so internally referenced that however many times you say that was a really good presentation, you're doing really well, they may not be able to hear it. So again, being aware of it enables you to help the person or yourself realize there is this other way of thinking. There is more information you can take on board, more you know, you can, if you learn more about what's going on here, there can be some reassurance that comes for that person too.
So when you're leading and managing, one other thing just to add here is that, again, be aware of what your own default style is. If you are the very externally referenced, you may be under the illusion that everybody else is also externally referenced and therefore requires a lot of feedback. So the people who you are leading and managing may be sat there thinking, why is this person micromanaging me? Why are they always insisting on telling me, how good or not so good that I'm doing, what I already know? So, they're feeling a bit frustrated that you're always kind of there and they don't need that input all of the time. On the other side of things, of course, if you are somebody who is very internally referenced, you may make the assumption that everybody else knows whether what they're doing is good or not. They're self-evaluating. Whereas if they're externally referenced, they're waiting for feedback. And because there is an absence of feedback, they may think you don't care. So this is about recognizing again what patterns people are running and what pattern you're running, and kind of giving them what they need to some extent.
Excellent. So while Kevin shares the slide with our example, our metaphor for internal versus external, I just trust that you've found that useful and interesting, that you've got some sense of which side of the scale you're on in this particular one, and invite you to stay curious and keep learning.